Thank you so much for being here with us today. As always, I'm really excited about our WEAll Talks and the time that our members are giving us to share what they've been working on, what they want to share with others and learn with others. So this month is going to be Lena Sky, our speaker, and we're really excited. She has worked in the harshest, not really sure, spotlights like the film, TV, media, theater, events, and music industries, where success is said to be made overnight and is possible to be forgotten in less than that. She wanted to find the human nature under all that makeup and the authentic hidden below predetermined lines. This way, her playground for her real work as a purpose strategist, brand culture alchemist, and the true growth coach. So Lena is going to be talking about, structurally speaking, what are we creating? And just as a reminder, for those who have never participated on a WEAll Talk, this is a space where Lena is going to be sharing about this topic, and then we are going to have time for all of us to discuss, to share, to ask her questions, or ask any other people here in this space questions. Is a space for deeper discussions on the topic that we are going through today, thanks to Lena. While she is presenting, anyone could use the chat if they want to leave any comments or if they want to leave any questions for further on to pass it on to Lena. If you need anything, I'm going to be paying attention to the chat. And if this is all, if I'm not forgetting anything important, Lena, the mic is all yours, and thank you for being here.
Absolute pleasure. So I'm just going to start my clock, take a deep breath, and invite every single one of you into this journey of, structurally speaking, what are we creating? And just a footnote, this is a very explorative space. And I really want to invite everyone to just strip off the need to know, strip off the need to get it right, and literally step into a space of play. Because why not? Let's just do something different and let's really uncover what it is that we're trying to create. And it would help if my slides turned. There we go. So I know predominantly one of the big questions that we're all asking is, are we there yet? And I think that's so appropriate in this COVID era, trying to figure out what side of the equation we're on. But one of the things I've noticed, and one of the hats that I wear, is also a true growth coach. So I call myself a purpose strategist, a brand culture alchemist, and a true growth coach. And it's always fascinating that we're so clear on where we're going, and sometimes that's not true. We're so clear of our starting point, and sometimes that's not true. But what we fail to often develop or articulate is what path we're going down, and that path can splinter off into a million different roads, each with their own snakes and ladders, each with their own dead ends, each with cul-de-sacs. But that each of these paths that we take actually shape our reality and shape how we move through the systems and the structures and the economy that we play with and that we engage in. And that's because I choose to believe that our structure really does define our reality. It doesn't determine it. We're not born and die in the same place. The gods have not sealed our fate. The dice have not been rolled. We have the ability to move and evolve and grow and get better and try on new things. But our structure really does define our reward system. I mean, we can see what the reward system is that we're living in right now, and what governing principles we're in. And if we bring it back to COVID, we've all got different governing principles on what socially distancing means and how we're engaging with other people and how we're navigating every turn of this pandemic. And it really does define our limitations, what needs get met, and what we're able to create in the process. So let me bring it back to something that I think we all share collectively in the room. And that's this conversation between a me and a we. a me culture and a we culture, and trying to find our place in all of this. And I want to invite us all to just strip away all the textbook definitions and just look at the essence of me and the essence of we. Because if we look at the essence of what we're working with, what we're trying to mold, what we're trying to shape and articulate in our own bodies of work, then it'll help us, I believe it'll help us to really get an understanding of what it is we're truly trying to create. And one thing that I want to point out here is we often think of me versus we as day and night, yin and yang, that they're completely two separate things with a very clear line down the side. But deep down, we're here because we know that there is this relationship between the two, that there's this pendulum between the two. And understanding that pendulum is really, really important. So I'm not going to read everything on the slide because I tried to make this as self-explanatory as possible. And I'd love to get into a conversation about this at the very end. But what I'm bringing to this conversation is understanding this me and this we, and why is it here and what is it reacting to? So if we think of me, it's very highly individualistic. It's about me and I matter and my way of doing things and my way of expressing myself in the world. And the fact that I use words like alchemy and magic in a WEAll talk. I mean, how me is that? That's very different to the WEAll talks from before. But what also becomes more interesting is as you carve out your unique me, you become more distinctive. You become more clear on who you are, and you create more spaces to have these conversations for you to know your worth and have your values. And something that we've noticed from this body of work is that this me is put into place because of diversity. Because the more diverse we are, the more opportunities there are for each one of us to be individual, to be distinctive, to be different, unique in our own ways. And then on the other side, we have the we, which is communal and collective, and this real sense of belonging, which is such an inherent human need, right? That we all have. We want to find this tribe. We want to find a group that we belong to and feel that family and that togetherness. And this feeling of we are, and that's inclusive and not exclusive at all. It really wants to bring more people in. And it's often interesting to see that sometimes through hiring strategies in certain corporates or across corporates, you have these diversity and inclusion movements where we hire out for diverse mindsets and perspectives and geographies and ways of being and thinking in the world. But sometimes we fall short and we then make it an inclusive thing where we now conform to an operation strategy or a business model or a brand strategy that doesn't allow for that diversity to coexist. And part of the big reason that there's resistance from that me economy to move into a we economy is this fear of losing one's sense of individuality. And there's so many examples of why we have the me and where it works and where it doesn't. And there's so many great examples of the we and where it works and where it's growing and learning and evolving as it would do. And I think a really great way to look at it from a very essential point of view is Black Lives Matter. Like we can all go back in time and it's still here, but we can go back to those very first conversations when the hashtag really went viral and noticing how all lives matter came up with that. And it's not to say that one is right and one is wrong, but it's just that real clear distinction of where's the me and where's the we, and how do we navigate these two ideals and these two worlds and these two narratives. And I think what makes it harder for an I culture to move ahead is because it's holding its position from the it culture. Remember the Industrial Revolution, where people didn't really matter? We were all cogs. We're just a faceless mob doing some greater good work, where our own individuality didn't matter. Well, that's part of the reason the I culture or the I economy doesn't want to move, because it fears this collective thing feels like the thing it knew from the past, where it's going to be stripped of its own personality and of its own voice. So it's holding for its position. So knowing that about why there's so much resistance, why it's still playing a very finite game, can help us to understand how to really have a conversation and really move the needle into flow. And this isn't just true of our economy and our politics and our states of evolution and where we are in our historic orientation. I mean, just the other day, I was on social media and a motivational speaker shared a quote saying, if you want to create the world that you want to create, like paint the vision of what you want to create, but then sacrifice it. Go out, do the hard work, literally forget about it, and then one day it'll come back to you. And I sent her a comment afterwards saying, you had me until that last line, pretty much, because I don't believe we need to sacrifice ourselves and sacrifice our dreams and sacrifice the vision of what we're creating, and that it'll magically spin around and come back to us. And she shared with me that she didn't believe it either, but that's what she had to do to sell motivation to her clients. And the fact that we're still individually selling blood, sweat, and tears in a hustle culture makes it so much more harder to shift the bigger economic narrative that we want to be part of. And of course, each of these models have created key points, from the Industrial Revolution. We got systems and processes. Human resources came onto the picture. Not that it necessarily is the best thing forward, but unions and rights and regulations came into existence. From the I culture, we learned to be agile and strategic and leveraged, and to fulfill our purpose and to have a voice and to go out and express it. And when we move into a we space, we find that we have different values and different attributes. And as we move between one and the other, we tend to lose all these other elements, and people feel forgotten in the process. And we're constantly trying to reconcile our need to have it all, while still trying to grow and evolve into the kind of business, city, organization, economy we want to create. So I just wanted to remind us that it's actually not all cultural work. It's actually structural. And these structures are part of our mindsets. It's part of our belief systems. It's part of our orientation. It's part of our personality. But it's also external structures that we've been growing up in and that we've signed up for. And they aren't personal, it's structural. It's our ways of belonging to different systems and getting some sort of an approval or some sort of reward system in play. And that we're trying to shift it without really understanding what the structure is that we're actually trying to shift. So an example that I really wanted to share is back in January 2018, Cape Town was going through a lot of water shortage, no rain, and we were just in a very bad space of drought. So a group of us came together and put together the Cape Town water crisis. And we had the hackathon on one side, we had information stands on the other for people who didn't really understand the complexity and the nature of the problem. And then in the room that I was involved in, we were looking at bringing in all the stakeholders to really look at the strategic, systemic, structural questions, and it all felt like it was going great. But the minute the conversation shifted to one person who represented somebody who was previously disadvantaged, who was being a voice for a line of ancestors who didn't have the same rights, who didn't have the same accessibility, who didn't even have access to running order. No amount of strategy and systemic and structural conversations could change the narrative. And I'm sure we've all experienced that, where we're doing great pioneering work, but then we have this very visceral psychological baseline, low Maslow hierarchy of needs thing that comes up, and it doesn't allow us to make those big critical changes, because we need to now go back and do the healing work that's on that side. Or how often I've heard coaching clients wonder how much of their uniqueness and their individuality they need to sacrifice in order to belong in a relationship or in a culture, in a work environment. And how easy it is for us subconsciously to put those two things on polar sides when that isn't necessarily true. That it doesn't have to be either or. I don't know how many of you were at the Wellbeing Economy Festival in November 2018 in Pretoria, and I don't know if Catherine is here. I mean, she's on this little picture over here, but I don't know if she's on the call. But it was one of the most defining touch points for me in connecting with the wellbeing economy. I had just met Lorenzo a couple of weeks back and heard about the book and read it and loved it and reread it and loved it even more. And what I loved about this event is that it was so human. It was so incredibly human. It wasn't about egos or PhDs or who was who in the room. It wasn't about having the right idea or intellectual property. It was just a group of people coming together, hopefully like we're doing today, or we will be doing today after this part of the talk, and just sharing of ourselves and the kind of world and economy ecosystem that we really truly want to create. And what I loved about it the most, it wasn't about me and it wasn't about we, it was about us. There was this room for interdependence where individuality got experienced and expressed, and there were a lot of tears in the room, there was a lot of emotion in the room, and everything was welcomed. And I don't know about you, but when I was in that room, that was the most visceral, beautiful experience of a world that I definitely want to sign up for and want to be part of creating. So coming back to this question of what are we creating, I wanted to share that how we choose is how we create. It's not the be all and end all, but it's definitely an indicator. And there's 3 doors that I want to bring to you today as ways of creating. The first door is a very reactive door. It's the Romeos and Juliets who couldn't be together but decided to be together anyway. It's the child who didn't follow their parents' curriculum to become a doctor or a lawyer and became an artist or an activist. But more than that, it's the desire to want to be inside the box or want to be outside the box or fight the other person because their box is bigger or bolder or purpler than your box. And we often see this in the business world of being in this kind of reactive, very highly competitive place. Another door that we might find ourselves going through is a responsive door, where we understand the box and we research the box and we think outside the box and we redesign the box and we make it beautiful and we reposition it. And this is predominantly the way people deal with problems. Our inherent desire to solve often comes from a responsive place, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's just noticing that for this to exist, there always has to be a box that we always respond or react to. And do we still want to keep perpetuating the box in the future of what we're creating? A book that I definitely recommend is Robert Fritz's book, A Path of Least Resistance, which is one of these books that I feel really brings a lot of things together. So have a look at that. But this statement still gets goosebumps. This idea that every time we problem solve or change manage or try and do behavior modification, that we're still responding to the fact that there's something limiting us, as if that's the predominant force, just really gets me. And I actually would love to unpack that with you later on if there's space for it in the Q&A. Because personally, I want to see more whole people and whole brands and real magic in the world. And I don't want to see a world that buckles under stress. But I understand that we need tension to create. We need tension to move. We need tension to bring things to life. And that tension is what allows us to move up to another way of doing things, a higher way of doing things, a higher perspective of doing things. So before I get too starsy on this, I wanted to invite you to notice that there is that third door on how we can create. And that's called the creation paradigm. A place where we choose interdependence and wholeness and thriving, integration and generative alliances and generative practices. And actually, when I think of this, this is what I see when I see a well-being economy. And I'm curious what you see when you see a well-being economy, or what you see when you're doing the work that you're doing towards this bigger narrative that you're contributing to. So I feel like I've spoken way too fast and way too long, and I can't see anyone, so I have no gauge on this, but I'm going to stop my screen share and come back to the room and see how any of that landed for anyone.
Thank you so much, Lena.
And now I hide.
No. Thank you so much. I guess people are taking in this. Maybe you want to repeat the question, or you want to give it more context, or if anyone would like to share or ask any questions or comment or answer what she just. If you want to repeat it, just to make sure.
Well, I see Michael looks like he wants to share something, so I'm going
to... Right, yes, I was just, but yeah, I did find it incredibly liberating, actually. Thank you for that. And very, very clearly defined, although I'm aware that defined is probably a term you want to challenge at a fundamental level. So yeah, is that freeing up? I mean, yeah, even thinking outside the box is implying there's a box there to think outside of. So I appreciate the fact that you're trying to take us to a space which is deeper into the transformational paradigm that we may normally operate at. And I'm curious as to what you feel the role of personal consciousness is in terms of our evolution as a person, in terms of consciousnesses in that context.
Well, I love that question, and I definitely do see that both are intertwined, that both are interdependent, actually, in huge, beautiful, fundamental ways. And I tend to work more with the individual, with teams, with brands, and with structures. So there's definitely a greater calling for me to play from that space. But in really transforming, to use that word, the narrative, and to really kind of getting people to move and accept this and welcome this new economy and welcome these new practices, there needs to be a raising of consciousness. And we're all doing it, I believe, because we're here. We're just all doing it in our own unique way. And I think that's what's really exciting, that could be space for this conversation, and that we're all agents of change in this conversation.
Can I just follow up with one other question? Sure. Then I'll be quiet, I promise. Do you think the dawning recognition that we live on a finite planet, and that the end of the world is nigh if we do not do something about it, is the single biggest catalyst for that change in consciousness? Definitely.
It's especially now with COVID coming in, that kind of gives us all a reference and all a shared space to kind of start questioning these things, because I think a lot more people before COVID were head in the sand and didn't really take this so personally, but now it's a lot closer to home, and whether or not the understanding's all there, it's definitely a great catalyst. And unfortunately, hopefully it doesn't lead to that. Hopefully we can turn it around before we have to go to that real doomsday Hollywood production to really inspire a change.
Mike Salvares, I think you raised your hand. The mic is yours.
Yeah, I did. Lena, thank you very much. The whole way that you put it, I think, is quite a revelation. It's very important for us to change our way of thinking. And I was trying to translate what you were saying back into the world that I live in and the movement that I'm involved in. And I suppose the economy is the box, or is one of the big boxes, isn't it? And we are embedded in a narrative about that economy and a set of institutions about it that is quite hard to liberate ourselves from. And that predetermines even our aspirations and our view of what's actually happening around us. Is this a good result? Is it a bad result? I mean, so often when I read the papers here, we have ridiculously contradictory headlines saying that the economy is booming ahead and people are going backwards. But no one seems to think that that's what, not enough people seem to think that that's a contradiction. So I think in the problem we all face with WEAll, it's a complicated mixture of changing the narrative, changing people's attitude, changing institutions, but also galvanizing ourselves to create more of that we, so that we assert what is the kind of economy that we want as part of the larger world we want. Because as you said correctly, and as so often the case, the economy is simply created as a kind of merciless machine of its own, which tangentially touches upon people's well-being, but you've got to keep feeding it sacrifices all the time. It's not, created rationally and systematically for the benefit and the well-being of people. It's something that exists in almost a hostile relationship with many of us. And I think it's very complicated to capture all those elements, but they all have to be addressed and overcome, don't they? I think it isn't a case of one solution to this problem. If there's the narrative problem, there's the institutional problem, there's changing our collective capacity to work together, because most people feel disempowered by the economy because of this massive machine metaphor. And it's so often reinforced by politicians to say, you don't know, as ordinary people, it's far too big the whole economy, the global thing. You'll never understand it. You've just got to put up with it and try and make the best of it. And so I think we have to convey that complexity without frightening people, but also convey to people their own power to create a different world, a different solution.
Absolutely. And there's so many moving parts in this thing. That's why I love that we're all here today, and there's obviously going to be people watching this later on. And even if people don't watch this, we're doing this work anyway, because there are so many structures that we can all touch in so many ways. And actually, Mike, something you reminded me that I didn't share because I was just so mindful of time. One of the presenters at the Wellbeing Economy Festival said something else that gave me goosebumps to this day, is we really need to get clear on our definition of well-being, because in the example that he used, the person who dropped the atomic bomb thought he was doing an act of well-being for his nation and for his time. So it is a very subjective thing. So how do we even deal with that structure and get people to come into the same page of well-being is a whole other question to ask.
Attila, I think you have a question as well.
Yes, just to that note, it's a really the whole presentation was enlightening, and just to that note that how we structure our well-being economy. I'm from the Green Revolution Foundation from Amsterdam, and we are opening up the world's first climate action coffee shop, and where 100% of our profits are funding climate art and climate action projects all around the world. But when we identified the root cause of the problem, you know, every decision is the decision influenced by our emotions, and and we say that the problem is the greed, that gathering more wealth becomes after a while an in itself, an exercise in itself. And in that sense, when you are gathering more wealth, you're distancing yourself from society and also from your capacity to relate to human emotions. So in that sense, that you dehumanize yourself in that sphere when you are creating this economy. So the only solution to that is to create a conscious world where we know that greed is our problem. So my question is, have you heard anybody who's already working about creating business solutions or movements to amplify this message that our well-being is our community well-being and our problem is our selfishness?
Not specifically that articulate message, but the closest body of work or movement that I found that kind of overlaps with that is the teal space, which is looking at wholeness and kind of bringing the whole person back into the conversation and not separating ourselves from our human emotions, and also to kind of becoming this artificial greed space that we're able to do that. So that's the closest I can get that I've seen to that.
Yeah, thank you very much for that information. I will check it out, and I haven't heard about them. Thank you.
Anyone else would like to share or have a question for Lena, or any thoughts, any sharings?
If I can just jump back on this, because I think that when I've seen and read the policy guidelines that Wellbeing Economy Alliance created, the sharing economy, how we create this sharing economy is going to be an important part of getting to the space where money is just a means to an end. So money is a tool to be used to reach a goal, and to create that economy, we need the consumers to be involved in this project, right? So the consumers has to want to use their consumption to reach a goal or to fund the goal. So our theory at Green Revolution is that we can create businesses which are focused on just on that the end goal of the business is not maximization of profits for a goal. So consumers can shop for education, healthcare, fight against poverty, climate action, or whatever. So we turn basically consumption into social value. And in that sense that this, we are a foundation, so we eliminate ownership. So there is no ownership in this, and we use a cash flow to equity dividend system to create shares for the investors. And in this system, we can apply, like we can open a telecommunications company, or we can open a grocery store chain like this. And the grocery store chain incentive is to channel 100% of its profits into educational healthcare programs. So I'm just throwing this out there, and I would love to have your ideas, because that creates an awareness in the consumer that the consumer's consumption is not just enriching somebody and ending up in a tax haven somewhere, but funding some social goal. So what do you think about this? Anybody?
Attila, maybe it's my level of English, or maybe it's that, but I have the feeling that this is getting a little bit out of the topic that we are holding in here. Not that I disagree with some of the things that I heard or that I think that I understood, but I just want to make sure that we are not going away, and I want to make sure with Lena especially, who is the one who is keeping and holding the space on this topic and why people were here. So Lena, if that, I just want to make sure that I'm the one who's a little bit confused. So
yeah, I was thinking about, structurally speaking, what kind of structures that we are creating in the economy. So that was my piece for the structures.
Okay.
I see a hand from Michael.
Well, I was just going to say that Leanna, in the at one stage in your presentation, you had a nice pyramid with different emotional tones, let's call them, and which correlated quite nicely with various levels of organizational structure. Yeah. And I mean, I'm thinking about Donella Meadows has got a structural thing. I can't remember the name of, but you know, you can intervene at certain points in the structure, and it will be more or less effective depending on how, inverted commas, deep you go. And you're obviously making a correlation with our emotional, our outlook as a being, and how we perceive ourselves at quite a sort of fundamental level. So I think, you know, if I was going to rephrase what Attila is saying there, it would be, you know, we're all trying to create organizations and processes which raise the bar in various ways, and you know, we could bring many examples. Attila has been one of them, of attempts to do that, and then analyze, you know, is there a more effective way of doing this? Is this going in the right direction? Are there trips here that we haven't seen? Maybe using your model.
And also maybe even dropping that question as well, because effective is, we're still looking at it from the box mentality of, is it bright enough and shiny enough and, well, you know, easily communicated? Not that that is a bad thing. It's also, it's what the client understands. It's the way business is done. So it's obviously inherent in all of our ways of thinking about things. But if we even step aside from that, what is it that we're actually trying to communicate and articulate and create? And let that be the guiding force. And let these other pieces then fall into play. Because sometimes we get so lost in perfecting that structure and getting that effective that we then lose the essence of what we're creating or what we're actually responding to.
Mike, I think you have a comment, and then Bridget.
I think going back to your three paradigms, reactive, responsive, and creation, is it not the case that all three are involved in the movement that we are part of, that we have to do three things simultaneously, in a sense. We have to have a reaction. We have to be able to explain the problems with this economy and this way of thinking. And we have to have solutions to it and respond to it. But we also do have to have an attractive alternative. And to some extent, all those three things have to be happening simultaneously, because it's never been the case in history, I don't think, that the power of an idea was able to transcend all the institutional forces holding down another bad idea, if they were entrenched institutionally, politically, in people's thinking and so on. And so what we're looking at is a multifaceted approach, I think, taking your three paradigms, rather than, I mean, the power of an idea can be terrific. People can latch onto it, but they haven't the capacity to rise above the oppressive power of the existing paradigm, because that's the one that's built into the institutions and determines their daily life and even their own thinking. So how they think about the problem has already defeated them, in a sense, because they needed a new way of thinking. You know, that famous saying of Einstein's, you can't change a problem by the same thinking that created it. And this is absolutely true of where we are at, I think.
And I love that you shared that, because there's definitely, they're inherent. We're human. We're never not going to have a reaction and not respond to something. We're going to get moved. The minute those emotions come back in play, it's going to get triggered. So we are dealing with a multitude of those levels. And my invitation is to match the right solution to the right level. That a reactive thing can only produce so much results, and it's only going to produce this structure, and a creative is going to produce a different structure. And when do we engage in what structure and move and oscillate between the different ones?
Thank you, Lena. Bridget, I think you raised your hand before.
Thanks, Anna. Yes, I did, and I think Mike kind of said a lot of things that I was going to say. That's brilliant, especially the Einstein quote. But from what you said, Lena, it made me think about, you know, it's kind of showing the destination, isn't it? So instead of, you know, trying, you know, sort of criticizing the current system, it's building the new and showing the new. So is it about storytelling? But then, you know, Mike's point about, you know, it's not just the institutions that have internalized the system. We have, you know, we all have, and we're, and so the kind of, you know, when I'm sort of talking about economy for the common good, I always talk about trying to change the picture in the mind of, you know, from the shareholder value model with the rings of economy and society and environment being separate to that nested model. In order to kind of get that mindset shift, because it can only happen once you've changed, you've switched your way of looking at things. But also the other powerful thing is examples of places that are putting into practice these ideas. So companies that are doing things, acting as for the system rather than for themselves, and cities and towns, and that kind of storytelling through real practice on the ground is, is this the best? It's showing, isn't it? It's the showing, not telling. You know, here it is. It can work, and here are the people doing it. Yeah.
It all plays its part, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Lena, anything else that you would like to share? Ask everyone in here. You mentioned during your presentation
Yes.
something that you would like to go through as well with
Yes, well, the one question that I wanted to leave everyone with was this idea of taking ownership of what it is that you're creating and how you want to move through that and take account of that. But the other question is this question between the we and the me and the us, and how do we bridge those divides so that it doesn't feel like we're drawing lines in the sand, that we can really create something that's inclusive and interdependent and welcoming, and truly designed for well-being. So I know that sounds like a question with a very clear answer that's going to be graded, and that's not the question. It's more of a conversational piece of how we can, if we have this narrative that's conflicting, like how can we work with this narrative and create a new narrative? So if anyone has any thoughts or any ideas or anything that you've done or what didn't work for you, feel free to share.
I think in some ways the problem is that our avenues for sharing are also part of the problem, that they are institutionally and culturally determined, and the economy, or thinking about the economy, hasn't been one of those areas. The economy has been marked as an area in which conversation is really only between experts and economists and policymakers. And I think what is really interesting and new about WEAll is the concept that we make the economy a conversation for people to participate in. We started in Australia, and we're going to be doing it more in the Andy project, asking people what kind of an economy they want. What are the things the economy should do in a good society? If we believe in a society that is equitable with high levels of well-being, what should we expect the economy to do for us rather than do to us? And I believe that that's a really powerful conversation. It hasn't been had, certainly not in Australia, at the level of ordinary people, because when they talk about the economy, they seem to be talking about short-term things like the movement of their wages or the cost of living and so on. So, but we don't have a conversation which says the economy is this institution that's very important to the outcomes in our lives and to the quality of the society. So what are we demanding of it? What do we want it to do for us? Because we don't even believe that it does things for us. We believe that it's so powerful that we have to kind of be subservient to it. So we have to change the mindset which says this. George Orwell famously said, or was it, no, I think it was Noam Chomsky, sorry, got that wrong. Noam Chomsky said that it's a human problem created by humans and it can be fixed by humans. Mm-hmm. And we don't have that mentality with the economy. We think that it's kind of supernatural almost.
Yes.
Too powerful. Global. It's determined by mystic forces, cosmic forces. You know, we have priests who read the entrails every quarter, and it's weird, really, that we've allowed ourselves to be so subordinate, and we've got to overcome that sense of inferiority that we have in talking about the economy. So I'm really looking forward to our next phase here, where we're going out to say, we know that there are a lot of problems in the economy. What sort of economy do you want? What should it do? What are the outcomes, the positive outcomes? So I think that's a really exciting part of the whole wellbeing economy movement that is yet to be tapped fully. It's not, we can help create that conversation, but I believe there are lots and lots more people in the community wanting to have that conversation, never been asked, been asked. And have good ideas.
What I appreciate here, seeing all of you on Zoom, not having met all of you yet in person, is how safe this space is to have this conversation. Because I must admit, when Anna reached out to me and I reached out to Anna, I'm like, who am I to have this conversation in a room of academics and this and that and that and that? And I can easily shut down my own voice, and I wanted to so many times. So there's also just that thing to be aware of, that we don't, like, I could feel that I don't have the right to have my voice being part of this conversation. And even tackling that thought and feeling is a big step forward to then getting those conversations really happening. Because at the end, we're still dealing with humans. We're human beings creating human systems, even if we let them slip away from underneath us.
Well, something that I can add to that is that from within we all, everybody's voices, everybody's experiences and knowledge and is valuable, and we need to raise those voices, and we need to come together and exchange all these thoughts and all these questions and support each other in answering and bringing clarity to the question. Like, for example, Mike was asking, no, what do we expect from economy, and picking that out and see what I can do for the next WEAll Talk. But I think these are questions that we need to come together and have some time to go into a deeper discussion. So we are almost done with the hour. I want to save these few more minutes just in case you have anything else that you would like to say before wrapping up, or you would like to add or comment to Lena or to everybody else in particular. Attila, yes.
Yes, when we talked about how we talk with people about the economy and what people want in the economy, I think that would be an easy concept to talk with people when we talk about the democratization of money. So in a democratic system, you have one vote, I have one vote, everybody has one vote, how we govern ourselves. And the economic system, every day we use our money to buy stuff. So how do we control how the...
Oh, Attila, is it me or is it her?
Lost him.
Okay. Hola. Oh no.
Nope.
Okay, well, I thought he was going to come back. God, I hope he does. Okay, so I was just checking the chat to make sure that there was no questions in there. So all messages for you, Lena. I just want to thank you. Thank you so much for bringing up this this conversation, for giving us the opportunity to discuss and to talk about this. I think a lot to reflect and a lot to share again in probably in the following talks, and something to consider constantly. Thank you all for joining us today. Thank you for being here.